नमो रमण ध्यायेत् शारदचन्द्रसुन्दरमुखम् ताम्रारविन्देक्षणम् भक्ताभीष्टवराभयप्रदकरम् कौपीनमात्रोज्ज्वलम् स्वात्मानन्दरसानुभूतिविवशम् सर्वानवद्याङ्गकम् श्रीमन्तं श्रीरमणीश्वरं गुरुवरं योगासनाध्यासितं ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणीश्वरं ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणीश्वरम् ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणीश्वरम्। हृदयकुहरमध्ये केवलं ब्रह्ममात्रम् यहमहमिति साक्षादात्मरूपेण भाति हृदि विषमनसा स्वं चिन्वतामज्जतव पवनचलनरोधात् आत्मनिष्ठो भवत्वम्। Namo Ramana. We will commence the Friday evening Atma Vicharam by listening to Bhagavan's Upadesham. As always, we will be reading Bhagavan's Upadesham from the book Ramana Answers, Self-Inquiry 1900 to 1950, a compilation of all the answers given by Bhagavan on the subject matter of Atma Vichara, self-inquiry, between 1900 to 1950 by our founder president Sri A.R. Natarajanji. After reading this week's question and answer and contemplating on the answer given by Bhagavan, by his grace, we will be then having a 20 minutes Atma Vichara practice, following which our President Sharda Akka would be talking about Atma Vichara as it has been contemplated in the Ramana Gita. And finally, we will have the concluding prayers to Bhagavan. We have been looking at the question and answers between 1936 to 1950 in this segment, and we are looking at the 27th question and answer. The devotee asks, association with the wise may strengthen the mind. There must also be practice. What practice should be made? I repeat the question. Association with the wise may strengthen the mind. There must also be practice. What practice should be made? Bhagavan says, yes, practice is necessary too. Practice means removal of predispositions. Practice is not for any fresh gain. I repeat Bhagavan's answer. Yes, practice is necessary too. Practice means removal of predispositions. Practice is not for any fresh gain. In this question and answer, we are coming to this normal idea whether an association with a Jivan Mukta alone will strengthen the mind, or there must be also a practice. So Bhagavan is saying practice is necessary too. What is the practice about? The practice is to remove all the predisposition, including that there is a wise man outside, that also, and I as an individual, that also, it is the removal of all these predisposition, identifying oneself as the body. It is this practice, the innering, that we do every time by inquiring, to whom is this? Who am I? And we practice it to see the self the way it is. When we do the innering, the more and more we practice it, it becomes more clear and clear that the self that Bhagavan is talking about is the state of Niralamba, the state where there is no dependency on anything external. So Bhagavan therefore emphasizes that it is important for us to practice it. By very virtue of practicing that state of the self, that it is not dependent on anything externally, becomes more and more clear. In fact, the practice leads us to a state where we see the usual approach of ours, that to see everything as an object, as something apart, is the foremost idea that keeps us looking for, or which keeps up the division coming up as the seer, seen, and the process of seeing. That foremost, what can we say, that foremost issue that we have, or the approach that we have to the way of even seeing the self, and that very act of seeing that way keeps the division always happening, would be seen by only the virtue of practice. And that is when it becomes clear to oneself that the very act of seeing the object, or trying to see for an object outside, is keeping this division. When it becomes clear, then the real Summa dawns on us, not as an understanding, but as a realization that by very virtue of being in that state of Summa is the very association with the self. And the predispositions, or the vasanas, which rise in the form of thoughts, and the thought itself being the foremost object, is the reason why all other divisions keep coming. And therefore Bhagavan asks us to question that foremost predisposition, or that disposition which has raised in the form of a thought, by inquiring to whom is this thought. And the answer would be, this thought is for me. Thereupon Bhagavan asks us to inquire, who am I then? If I am saying I, and I is also a thought, what am I referring to this I as? Whom do I refer to this I as? Or where from this thought I rises within me? When we dive deep into the source of the I, this very practice brings about the clarity that by every outlook of trying to find an object, including the self also as an object, to be experienced as an object, is the issue that we don't associate with the self which is naturally present. So Bhagavan is saying here, by the very virtue of the practice, this clarity starts to dawn within us. And the more and more we see that by associating with this practice of outwardness, we are moving away from the natural self that we are, and therefore the practice finally subsides into the self as an act of summa iru. Until such time, Bhagavan says that we should repeatedly practice. So Bhagavan finally says in this, practice is not for any fresh gain. In this way, he is bringing us to that recognition that we are not going to gain anything by the practice. The very act of what we do to gain will be seen as a hindrance to be abiding in the self. And that to see that, to get that clarity, it is important that we repeatedly practice, says Bhagavan, and therefore he says practice is necessary too. And so does it mean that the association with the wise is of not much use? Actually, it is the grace of the Sadguru, the grace of the association with Ramana and his teaching with Bhagavan that makes us be repeatedly coming back to this vichara, makes us do the practice. This we should recognize too. It is the love of Bhagavan which we can't even comprehend that makes us repeatedly get back to the practice. And he would not leave us until we are completely free of all our predispositions. And therefore we should see that the association with the wise along with the practice is necessary. So with that clear understanding that both the bhakti and the practice of gnana is required. These are like the two wings which makes the bird fly. So we should, as practice is within the domain of ours, Bhagavan is saying that we should repeatedly practice. And in Atma Vichara, the way we practice, as Bhagavan has made it clear, is the thought being the foremost predisposition, or the form of how the predisposition rises. He asks us to diligently inquire every thought by asking, to whom is this thought? The answer obviously becomes clear. This thought is for me only, not for somebody else next to me. And when that clarity rises, we should immediately inquire, who am I then? when we put this question, who am I? The approach should be to inquire and find out within, what do I say as I within me, or where from this thought I rises within me. It should not be any mental answer, but rather an investigation into what do I refer to as I. And when we do so, the very grace of Bhagavan, which has appeared in the form of this question, who am I, takes us and makes us abide in the self. Initially, we may not be having that clarity, but with repeated practice, it becomes very clear that the very act of questioning, who am I, makes us abide in the self. And until this abidance in the self becomes natural, Bhagavan says that the practice of Atma Vichara should be done. With the immense grace of Bhagavan, with which alone we have come to this most direct path, let us do Atma Vichara for the next 20 minutes. Shri Ramanaya.
Namo Ramana. Prostrations to Ramana, shining is the self in all beings. By the immense grace of the self manifest as Ramana, we have been meditating on self inquiry through the answers given by Bhagwan Ramana to various questions posed by seekers of truth. And by that very grace, we have been practicing. We have had a session of practice of self inquiry as well. And in this part of the satsang, we are meditating on Bhagwan's answers to questions of seekers in the 1900s, early 1900s, from 1913 to 1917, when Bhagwan was at Virupaksha cave and Skandashramam, and these have been recorded by Ganapati Muni and compiled in 18 chapters as Ramana Gita. We are now meditating on the 5th chapter, which is the Hridaya Vidya, the science of the heart. And in this, having pointed out that the heart is in fact the source of everything, and hence to describe it would only be a concept, Bhagwan, out of compassion, goes on to give us some pointers, very, very important pointers, supports for our practice of self-enquiry in his explanation about the spiritual heart. So he says what the heart is not. It's not the Anahata Chakra, it is not the physical blood pumping organ, it is the source. Actually, it is the self, it is the source of all things, it is the source of all thoughts, it's the source of the I thought, it is the very self. And what is the relationship between this spiritual heart, the source of the I thought, and the I thought, and the other thoughts? When Bhagavan says that this is the source of all thoughts, this is the source of the I thought, what is the relationship? How are they connected to this source? Bhagavan has gone on to explain to us that through the mystic channel, or the very subtle channel called the Sushumna Nadi, the energy moves from the spiritual heart, which is a little to the right of the center of the chest. And from here it moves to the place of the Sahasrara, or the mind center, the head. And from there it pervades the entire body, Bhagavan had told us. And when it pervades the entire body, one begins to engage through the body with a world. And one becomes worldly, samsari. So Bhagavan said, do the reverse, or he indicates that we should do the reverse by saying that when the Sahasrara is stationed in the heart, when there is abidance in the self, Atmastasya Sahasraram Shuddham Jyotirmayam Bhavet, it is absolutely pure light. There are no other thoughts arising in it. And if they by chance happen to arise due to the proximity of sense experiences, even then they will not touch the experience of the self. Then Bhagavan has gone on to tell us what it means to have no thoughts at all, and what it means to be untouched by experiences. He clarifies that the being untouched by experiences is called Sahaja Samadhi. And in Nirvikalpa Samadhi, there will be no awareness of objects whatsoever. But it is after passing through Nirvikalpa Samadhi that one becomes established in the Sahaja. It is after experiencing the absence, total absence of objects in the presence of the full consciousness. Because Bhagavan has said, he says, isn't it, that uh, when the mind Sahasrara is in the source, that is Shuddham Jyotirmayam, it is pure, it is uncontaminated by anything other than itself. So pure means, Shuddha means nothing other than itself is there. So if there's a thought of another, if there's a thought of the other, that is contamination. Because the moment another comes in, there is no purity. In milk, if water is mixed, there is no purity. In water, if milk is mixed, then the water is not pure. It does not remain as pure water. Or in water, if something else is mixed, some dust gets mixed, or something else just gets mixed up with it, some minerals get mixed up with it, then we say the water is not pure. So whenever another comes in, it is not Shuddham. So Bhagavan talks of Nirvikalpa Samadhistu Vishaya Sannidhau Bhavet. Vishaya Sannidhau Bhavet. Vishaya Asannidhau Bhavet. In Nirvikalpa Samadhi, there are absolutely no objects. There is no objective knowledge. There is no duality. What do we mean when we say there is no duality? What is dual? Dual is, as we just now meditated upon it, it is the presence of the other. It is the presence of something other than I. When I become divided, I become dual, myself become dual, because in the self actually there is nothing other than the self. But I perceive myself, when I perceive myself as divided, as fragmented, as dual, or sometimes as multiple, I see myself as many. That many is actually dual, because once there are two, there will be many. And that's why even if there is one implies two, three, four, and many. Non-dual is not one single thing also. It doesn't have anything to do with numbers. So this duality, how do we experience duality? When Bhagavan says Vishaya Asannidhau Bhavet, there will be no objects. How do we experience the duality? We experience it. We say we experience the world. We experience objects. How do we experience it? We experience it as thoughts. All things are known, all objects are for us thoughts. They exist in the form of thoughts. So the moment a thought arises, it gives us the feeling there is a thought and there is I. I for whom the thought is. That's why Bhagavan asks us to inquire, for whom is the thought? When I say the thought is for me, I recognize the presence of two. One, the thought, and another, I, the thinker. I, the thinker, is there, and my thought is there. I am divided into thinker and thought. So actually, I have become fragmented into thinker and thought. In Nirvikalpa Samadhi, what happens? This division disappears or dissolves. How does it happen? In the absence of thoughts. In the absence of thoughts, can there be something called a thinker? Can one recognize or experience someone called a thinker when there are no thoughts? Thinker is an experience that is dependent on the presence of thoughts. When there are no thoughts, there is no thinker. So thinker is a dependent entity, therefore dual, dependent on something else, dependent on the existence of thoughts. So, what happens? This division is there. And when there is division, there will be conflict, there will be worldliness. That is, the division is subject and object. I and my thoughts. That the object is the world. And why do we engage with the world? Because it feels very real. Many of us say that thoughts arise when we see something, when something provokes a thought. That's why Bhagavan has told us in the earlier verse, even if objects are nearby, Sannikarshena yadyapi, when they come close, na bhavet yoga bhangaya. Because what we say is, I would have sat quiet, but I heard some sound, I heard a song playing, I heard the bell ringing, I heard my phone ringing, or I heard the whistle of the kettle. I heard something. When I heard something, that provoked a thought in me. Or I saw something. When I saw something, it provoked a thought in me. I heard something about someone. I heard that something is happening in the world. Until I heard it, there was no thought about it. Say there is a war happening. If I do not know the war is happening, I do not think about the war. The moment I hear about the war, I start thinking about the war. The moment somebody tells me something about me, I start thinking about that part of me. If somebody blames me, if I hear a negative comment about myself, then thoughts of hurt come up. If I hear a positive comment about myself, then thoughts of pleasant thoughts about myself come up. This is all because of inputs from outside, from the world. It's because the world exists and the world is giving me inputs in the form of various sense experiences that I am having all these thoughts. This is how we are behaving. We behave as if this is the truth. That there is an input coming to us, and because of that input, we are reacting. So Bhagavan says, all right, if that is the case, then how do you get yourself to go back to that thought-free state, that nirvikalpa? And first of all, that it is important to get to a thought-free state, because until we experience freedom from thoughts in a very certain manner, in a decisive and in a manner about which there is no further doubt, when we have become aware of our own thought-free experience, then and then alone will we recognize that we are not dependent on thoughts for our existence. We are not dependent on thoughts means we are not dependent on any object whatsoever for our existence. The self is completely niralamba. It does not require any support other than itself. It is its own support. It is full. It is in fact the support for everything. So we have to get to that experience. Only then it is known to us directly. We have to get the experience directly, no matter how much we think about it, how much we meditate on it, how much we are convinced about it intellectually. Unless we experience it, it will not get established in our what can we say, in our consciousness, in our mental framework. We keep going back to our habit of identity. Even after we experience nirvikalpa, we get back to identity until we recognize that this which we experienced as freedom from thoughts is actually our natural state. It is not something which we are holding. It's not something to which we are going and coming back. That is our natural state. So that will be the final point. And before that, we have to experience the freedom from thoughts. But we say we cannot experience freedom from thoughts because there is this world which is constantly impinging on our consciousness in some way or the other, which is consciously entering our domain of thoughts and creating further thoughts. So Bhagavan says, you are talking about a world. In the next verse, he says, Andam vapushi nishesham Nishesham hridaye vapuhu. So he says the whole world, andam vapushi nishesham, without even an iota left out, remaining. Nishesham, without even a slightest bit remaining, the entire andam, the entire world, the entire universe, vapushi, it is contained in the vapu or the body. Andam vapushi nishesham. The entire universe is contained in the body. And निश्चेषं हृदये वपुः तस्मात् अण्डस्य सर्वस्य हृदयं रूपसंग्रहः. The body in turn is contained in the heart. Therefore, the entire universe is contained in the heart only. There is nothing outside the heart. If you think there's a world outside the heart, it's impinging on you, it's impinging on the consciousness. He says there is no world outside the body. The entire world, the entire universe is contained in the body. In Saddarshanam, Bhagavan says in the Sanskrit version of Ulladinakadu, he says, Yat panchakoshatmakamasti deham तदंतरा किं भुवनं चकास्ति देहं विना पंचविदं तदेतत् पश्यन्ति के वा भुवनं भणन्तु. Without this body, which is made of the five-fold body, without the five-fold body, the five sheets, the five sheets which the body has, this body which consists of five sheets, apart from it is there a world. Yat panchakoshatmakam asti deham tadantara kim bhuvanam chakasti. Is there a world apart from the body? Can anyone experience a world? Deham vina panchavidam tad etat deham vina Pashyanti keva bhuvanam. Is it possible to see a world? If I do not have a body, can I experience the world? So, the entire experience of the world is dependent entirely on the existence or the experience of being a body. If one is not a body, there is no world, says Bhagavan. And this is what happens in deep sleep. We do not know that we are the body and there is no world at that time. So the entire world is actually contained within me, within my body image. It is based on my body image. So why should I say that it is because there is a world that I am interacting with it? In another context, Bhagavan says, does the world tell you I am existing apart from you? Or are you saying there is a world existing apart from me? It is you. So the entire thing is contained in the body. The body idea is not there. There will be no experience whatsoever. There will be no world whatsoever. So let's not blame the world unnecessarily for what all we have to do. Because of this situation, I'm behaving like that. Because of that situation, I'm behaving like this. Bhagavan says it's all contained in you. It is contained in the idea, I am the body. So the trick is to transcend the idea, I am the body. That's why Bhagavan has given us the question, who am I? See, the way in self-inquiry, in the practice of self-inquiry, in that method, we ask ourselves, for whom are these thoughts? The answer comes, for me. Which means, the thoughts are the world. They are the multiplicity. They are my experiences. They are mine. The world is mine. It is not I. So that mine gets absorbed into the I the moment I say, these are my thoughts. Without me, there are no thoughts. It is because of me that there are thoughts, and they are my thoughts. So I can either have my thoughts or I need not have my thoughts. They are mine, they are my possessions. They are not independent entities who can have any kind of hold or power over me. No hold on me, no power over me. They are dependent entirely on the I. And what is this I? This is when we question, we realize, who am I? I feel I am a particular entity, vapuhu, a body, a form. But who am I? Where from does this awareness of the body arise? The body does not have its own consciousness. This is very clear to us in many, many, many ways that the body is not a source of its own consciousness. In which case, what is the source of consciousness of the body? How come I know I am this body? What makes me say I am this body? What gives consciousness to this body? Bhagavan had already told us it is from the heart that it rises to the Sahasrara, from the Sahasrara to the whole body. So the heart is the source of the body awareness. So he says, take it back to the heart, pull it back to the heart, pull the world into the body. Recognize that the world is entirely dependent on body thought. And when I ask, who am I? Or whence am I? From where is this body awareness arising? Where from within me is the body awareness or the body thought arising? When I think thus and I inquire and try to trace the I to its source, and when it merges in the source, one would, by that very grace, know that it is the heart alone which is the source, says Bhagavan. Tasmad andasya sarvasya hridayam rupa samgraha. The heart alone is the entire universe. When one knows this, then there will be no need for further thinking about anything. That's why Bhagavan says, take the attention back as and when it moves outwards. By that strength of that grace, continue this inquiry until it is established in nirvikalpa, where there are no objects, and further, when even if objective awareness arises, it does not disturb our awareness of the grace in any way. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri
अपार सच्चित् सुखवारिराशे यस्योर्मिमात्रं भुवनं समस्तम् गुहाहितं तं रमणं गभीरम् चिन्ताविहीनं हृदि चिन्तयामि चिन्ता